In Search of the Source, Chapter 1, Beginning at the Beginning. Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Bang! Stuck already. Hapele, Isa, and I had just gotten started. We'd prayed, the pencils and papers were out, books were open, everything was ready, and now we were bogged down on the very first verse. But if you never start, you never finish. We even had a deadline approaching. How do you say created in Folopa? That was a word I hadn't encountered yet. I usually learned words by observing and by asking questions. If someone was cutting a tree, I'd ask them what they were doing. They'd say, Nai de Daitepo, and I'd write it down and work at lodging it in my memory. If they were cooking food or planting a garden, I'd stop and ask the words to describe it, always absorbing as much as I could. But how do you come up with a word for something you've never seen? How do you even describe what you're looking for? I'd been up and down that village, watching people, talking to them, picking up words, learning how they do things and why, but in all my time I hadn't seen anyone creating, especially not like that described in Genesis. Nobody was making something out of nothing. Hapele, Isa, and I struggled, but without knowing what I was trying to get at, they could offer no word that was adequate. We had the word for make and form and build, but none of these were quite it. We were not able to come up with the word that would express bringing something new into being. We decided to move on. Maybe something would come later. Before we did, though, we prayed again. We asked God to somehow work out our circumstances so we could discover the word we were looking for. There must be one in the Folopa language somewhere. We continued with the translation, but that didn't get much easier. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. I had the word dai, light, but how do you say "let there be"? Again, there weren't too many people doing things just that way, or even using that expression. God's verbs are not man's verbs. But he did it. He made the light, and he saw that it was good. And if he could do that, he could enlighten us. We translated it, but I just wasn't so sure it was good. Not yet. But this was just a draft, and we moved on. We went on like that through the 6 days of creation until the 7th day when God rested, and so did we. There was a feast coming up, and some of the men were preparing to go on a hunt. Hapele and Isa would be going, which meant that the translation work we'd just begun would be coming to a halt for at least a week. You wouldn't want to go, they said. It's too hard. The hunting around Setu Wopu is very far away. It's very difficult to get there, very steep with lots of rocks, many leeches. You would never make it. I knew by all this they wanted me to go, so of course I did. The next day we set out for the deep rainforest. The trails in this part of the country are straight up and straight down, and not exactly taxpayer-maintained tourist paths. Down in the rainforest, where it never dries, half the walking is in mud, the other half is in streams. Trails lead through rivers and swamps, over fallen logs, across gorges, stair-stepping up or down cliffs, or climbing exposed tree roots, hanging out of steep descents. The Folopa do it all barefoot, always at an unrelenting pace, racing against the ever-moving sun. About midday, we came to our first stop. Besides the shortness of usable daylight hours, the men don't like to pause much on a trek because of the ever-present leeches. When they stop at all, it's when they find a place that's relatively leech-free, like a fallen tree suspended clear off the ground. This day, I had been ready for a break for a long time when we finally got to a tree like that. We all walked out on it, squatted down, lined up like birds on a wire. I was really beat, and there was no hiding it. One of the guys looked at me and said, "Heto Ali, you're going to die." I took out my handkerchief, soaking wet just from being in my pocket, and wiped my forehead. I just looked at him. So I was going to die. Someone said, "Why don't you eat something?" Those were welcome words. I had been waiting for them to take the lead on this for quite a while. I was ready for lunch, but nobody else was moving. Everybody seemed to be waiting for me. Maybe this was only snack time, so I'd take a snack. I knew I needed some nourishment. I reached into my backpack and felt around. Everybody, including me, was curious about what special treat Carol might have put in there. I wasn't disappointed when I pulled out a big Cadbury chocolate bar, wrapped in bright red, white, and brown. Bold across the front was printed the word energy. Boy, I thought, that's what I need. In a culture where everything is shared, there are no private pleasures for a moment like this. I opened the end of the wrapper, bit off a chunk. I felt the gaze of 40 eyes.
40?
40. So how many people?
40 people.
40 eyes. How many? 20. After a moment's quiet, me savoring, looking off into the rainforest, feigning oblivion to the eyes, one of the men spoke. "Felere," he said. "Tastes good?" "Felerapo," I said. "It tastes good." And then, of course, "Do you want some?" Do you think he wanted to share?
Yeah. No.
I hardly had to ask, and he hardly had to answer. He broadened his mouth and sucked breath through his teeth, the signal for yes. That would be really wonderful. I broke off a square and gave it to him. Now 40 eyes were on him as he relished the chocolate and ran his tongue around the inside of his mouth. A lick later, somebody asked him, "Felere?" "Brothers," he said in the Falopa tongue, "I'm dying of deliciousness, whatever this is." "What's it like?" they asked. I wondered how he would answer. I could see the wheels turning in his head, his tongue still savoring over his teeth. To what would he compare this most different of tastes? He finally looked up. "It's like pig's liver," he said. Everybody hummed with satisfaction. I don't think I would have chosen just that comparison, but to them, it was the equivalent of the highest of high. Of all the foods they get, pig is the best. And of all of the pig, the liver is the best part. After that, there was nothing to do but divide the bar into 18 more pieces and pass them out. They took their bites, chewed and sucked air through their teeth. Everybody agreed. Chocolate deserved the pig's liver prize for excellence. That was the appetizer. After that, I pulled out a sandwich, and they all reached into their shoulder bags and started bringing out all sorts of garden vegetables, like taro and yam, pre-cooked for the trip. Less sweet, perhaps, and without fancy packaging or energy printed on the outside, but certainly containing more of the oomph that would get legs and bodies up and down the hills in afternoon hours to follow. About dusk, we reached an overhanging cliff, the kind of place they like to sleep under when out on the trail. Then, if it rains, and it's likely to, at least they'll sleep dry. I was sapped. Cadbury chocolate had long since left me, as well as everything else. We'd been going for 12 hours straight, with just the one rest. My clothes had been soaked and re-soaked with sweat. Mud coated my shoes, socks, and legs. Bright red runs of still uncoagulated blood from leeches added a bizarre aspect to my calves. Did you know that leeches have a chemical that they let out when they suck on you?
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps your blood from coagulating. That means like getting
Hard.
thick and goopy.
So
Because no, not necessarily. Leeches, because they need to drink the blood, they need the blood to continue flowing. So they kind of make it so that your blood doesn't clot up as soon as it normally would. As we settled, the rain started. Before it came down hard, some of the men had gone off to gather firewood and whatever they could forage for supper. Some had found eggs buried in piles of decaying leaves, incubated by the heat. These finds are usually 90% embryo, but still good for part of a meal. So that means there's a baby something developing in that egg, whether it be a bird or some kind of reptile. Returning, they made fires, cooked, ate, and prepared for the night. It was cozy, all of us crowded together, the firelight glistening off the cliff at our backs, the rain falling like a sheet an arm's length in front of us, loud in the trees. Then we bedded down. It got even cozier. 20 of us lay there, side by side, like sardines, with me in the position of honor, right in the middle. I was the only one with a legitimate blanket over me and a thin foam mat between me and the bumps underneath. Everybody else had odd assortments of sleeping gear, an old towel, part of a sheet, some bark cloth. Under them they'd put a few leaves they'd picked up on the way in. Sound cozy?
No.
Pretty soon everybody was snoring. The fires went out and it got cooler. In the middle of the night I turned over and realized that my blanket had been stretched into further service. Not only was it covering the man on my right, but in part the man next to him too. I looked over the other way and it was the same thing there. There were 5 of us under the blanket. I didn't do much tossing and turning that night, nor did I do much sleeping. But so it is sometimes the first night in a new bed. Not much of a bed. It rained all night. Out before us was a vast ocean of jungle wetness. The small piece of ground under this cliff was the only dry spot in the jungle for miles around. As dawn approached, the rain lessened. A fog had rolled in. In the half-light, shapes were beginning to stir. Bodies were waking. As I lay there, listening to the peaceful sound of drops falling on 1,000 leaves, I heard a murmuring from somewhere down the row. It was somebody talking, half out loud, half to himself. As I listened, I heard another down on the other side, and another, and another. The men were praying. Though these petitions were meant for God, I didn't think anyone would mind if I listened in. I could just get the words of the men closest to me. The man closest to me. It was Sophia. Lord, he was saying, you know we're on a hunting trip, and you know what we're after. All the game in the forest is yours. If you want to keep it, that's up to you. But if you want to give some of it to us, that would be good. Help our hunting dogs. Don't let anything happen to them. You know how we need them. Don't let them die. Please care for the women and children back in the village. Keep them safe. Don't let sickness come to our families. Protect them from enemies. Don't let the pigs get into our gardens and destroy them. He went on like that for a while, and then I heard him pray something else. Concerning Hito Ali, he said, you know we're all down here on the ground in the dark. You teach Hito Ali our language so he can give us your word, and we can be in the light. He kept praying, but that was all I could get. When I heard it, When I heard it, I was moved. There seemed to be a tremendous irony in it all. Here I was, the big white missionary, the one who had come all the way around the world to live among these people, to learn their language and their ways, and translate the book. And here I was, sandwiched between 20 hunters, who knew almost nothing of God's word, lying here on the bare earth, but for a thin mat or a few leaves. Here they were spending their very first waking moments in prayer. And some of those prayers they were praying for me. I was humbled. It would not be the last time. Here's a note. In Filopa culture, after a person has become a parent, it is no longer proper to call them by their given name. Rather, they are known by the name of their firstborn child with the word Ali for father or Hama for mother following it. Since our first child's name was Heather, or in Filopa, Heto, I am known as Heto Ali, and Carol is known as Heto Hama. Young men and women without children continue to be called by their own given names.